welcome to the Interim Budget Discussion 2015 live on MTV Sports and Newsfirst, the largest independent news network in Sri Lanka. I'm Minoshi Ratnasekara, live from Jai Hilton, Colombo, where the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, the 176-year-old premier business chamber in Sri Lanka, has organised this discussion on the Interim Budget 2015, which was presented in Parliament just yesterday. And this discussion is streaming live on Newsfirst.lk. And this is the first opportunity the business community can engage these key government officials in discussions about the government policy and economic development plans. And I'm sure this is going to be a very constructive discussion. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to the Chamber of Commerce Chairman, Mr. Suresh Shah, for the opening remarks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by extending a very warm welcome to our distinguished panel this evening, the Honourable Minister of Finance, Mr. Ravi Karunanayake, the Honourable Deputy Minister of Economic Affairs, I hope I got that right, Dr. Harsha De Silva, the Secretary of the Treasury, Dr. Samaratunga, and the Governor of the Central Bank, Mr. Arjuna Mahendran, along with Dr. Indrajit Kumarasamy, whom all of us know as an economic analyst. So a warm welcome to all of them and to all of you as well. We have the government's full economic team here today to speak to you and also to answer any questions that you may have on the budget. But before I get into the budget itself, on which I have a very few words, Indrajit will do the speaking on behalf of the Chamber, in a sense. Let me start by welcoming the government's 100-day program, which is fundamentally focused on governance and also via some significant policy reforms on the Constitution. Things such as the 17th Amendment to the Constitution, which was taken away some time back, presidential term limits, and also balancing power between the presidency, between the cabinet, and between the parliament. I believe these are all welcome moves, and we wish the new government all the very best in this endeavour, and we extend the support of the Chamber, the fullest support and cooperation of the Chamber in these endeavours. In terms of the budget itself, the way we see the budget, we had a long discussion on it this afternoon. The way we see it is that on the one hand, it's been a budget where election promises have been fulfilled as they should be. Promises were made, promises had to be delivered on. And in order to meet the expenditure, there was a need to generate revenue. And that revenue has been generated or expected to be generated via certain proposals which will touch and which will impact a smaller segment of the community. So there are a few one-off taxes which might be seen by the markets as being a little bit distortionary. Having said that, we hope that the budget, in a sense, is a collection of a number of items rather than a meaningful expression of a full economic policy. We don't expect an economic policy or economic strategy to be delivered in a very short period of time of 20 days, and that's understandable. So we do hope that going forward, when the next budget is presented, it will be based on a number of sound economic principles. Having said that, in terms of concerns on the budget, actually, yes, some of the one-off taxes will hurt, but having said that, if you need to meet the expenditure, so be it. But I must also tell my good friend, the Minister, that not everyone in the private sector has ill-gotten gains. I think a number of us in the private sector do our business very well, and I hope that is appreciated going forward. That really was the fundamental concern that we had, that the private sector might be viewed in the wrong light. So we look forward to working closely with the government in terms of both its economic policy as well as I mentioned earlier, on the governance aspect. We wish the government all the very best and look forward to a close working relationship. So thank you very much. And with those words, let me invite the Honourable Minister to speak a few words to you. Thank you.
Honorable Harsha, Chamber President Mr. Suresh Shah, my Secretary to the Ministry Dr. Samaratunga, Governor of the Central Bank Mr. Arjuna Mahendra, Mr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I'm very thankful to Suresh for organizing this meeting, because it was a week ago when we were saying that we were going to bring our interim budget out on the 29th. It was he who first called and asked, would it be possible for us to have a meeting on the 30th? And I thought it was a very good opportunity to explain the things that we brought out in the budget. After all, you would know that we only had 20 days in office, and of that, at least 8-10 days went on for the transitional process. So it was the Treasury team, Harsha, Iran, the Governor, and ourselves that put this together. When you look at it initially, I know some of the businessmen in the upper echelon has got a little concern. But 98% of the country is extremely happy. All what we got to do was a mix between the political aspirations and the economic delivery. Now we have got to do this with the budget that was put into place in 2014, November budget that was brought by the former President, Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa. So we did not want to make a full change of all that was going on. What we did was we took certain elements which we thought where the costs were exorbitant, corrupt in nature. We got that reduced. We ensured that it was a policy that we didn't want to put any burden onto the common people who repose their faith in Honorable Maithripala Sirisena, Ranil Wickremesinghe and our government. And also we also want to deliver every single thing that we mentioned within the 100 days. So with those parameters, we had a very little option as to how to go forward. So firstly, you must understand that there was an immense amount of confidence that was placed in our government. So we did not want to breach that trust in any way. It may be on the short run that we have been a little offensive on certain areas, but we have good fundamental reason as to doing so as well. We will ensure when we say one-off, it is one-off, unless the market decides to behave in a different way. We are a very responsible government, and we want the economy to move, not in the hands of a few, open it, a clean operation to go forward. And that's the promise our President, our Prime Minister, and I gave in Parliament yesterday. The government is very keen to ensure such things goes on. It's going to be an open government. There is no necessity for one lot to be moving around the Finance Ministry or the Prime Minister or the President. It's going to be a government led by the Cabinet of Ministers, and that collective responsibility will go down right to the last letter. So we have got a team that is responsive in doing so, and that's why I thought it was ideally placed to meet up with all of you all and get our message across. While doing this, we are very concerned with the international players that will be part and parcel of the operation. So when we say that there is something going on here, then it obviously gives a lot of different opinions to them, and that's why yesterday when we were speaking the budget process, we did not want to dwell in the dead past. We only said we inherited such a situation. Just to give one example, the public debt which we thought was in the range of 6.9 trillion, we have done an estimate in these 20 days, and it's roughly in the range of about 8.8 trillion. Now these are things that if we didn't tell you, 6 months down the way when we find more things unearthing, then we'll basically say, this is part of your administration. So we did not want to take responsibility for anything that has not been done by us. And if we have done anything thereafter, we'll take full responsibility. So that's the premise that we have brought this 20-day budget into place. There may be some genuine errors that would have happened. We'll get that corrected. Our intention is not to distort the market, but to ensure that if there has been any ill-gotten gains on certain areas, certainly there won't be any mercy on them. But any area where there is a genuine error, we are the first to say sorry and we'll get it corrected. Once again, it was a 20-day operation. In a matter of fact, my secretary, Arjuna, and the team at the Finance Ministry, Chandra and Mr. Article and the full team, we worked till 5:30 in the morning just to correct what we were going to say. And unlike others, all of us were there at 5:30 in the morning the day the budget was being spoken. So that's the reason why there may be some errors. When I'm coming here, some of the auditors and the accounting specialists did say that there are certain areas of question. We'll get those corrected. But all I want you all to say, take this opportunity, is that we have done our very best from an economy that has gone to rack to ruins, not what was extolled by the central bank then. It has been handed over to a very competent safe person, Mr. Arjuna Mahendan, and our team will ensure that we will be able to answer any of your questions today. So I would prefer open this up to your questions, but you know what we said yesterday, and any clarifications on that will be answered by us, and I leave it open to you. Once again, let me call all of you. This is an open government that is there. If you have any good proposals, you don't need to go after any minister. We will have a team that is there. You are able to come there and then ensure that that moves in a quick pace. When we open this subject up to the investments that are going to come, we very specifically mentioned that if you put a proposal in, that you will have a final answer in 100 days, including all the government institutions that are there. One person's question is, why 100 days? You can do it in 30 days. But we want to be practical in doing so. And that's the reason that we are able to ensure that what we said will be done. So ladies and gentlemen, please take this as a working experience with you all today, that if there are good proposals that come, I'm sure we'll be able to get those incorporated, but ensure the most important thing is that we have done every single thing without adding on to the budget deficit. We inherited a budget deficit which was supposed to be 521 billion, 4.6% of GDP. We, after doing every single thing, we have managed to reduce the budget deficit to 494 and 4.4% of budget deficit. That has stunned the present opposition. But we have done not just an arithmetic gimmick that is there, genuinely cut down certain capital costs which are corrupt in nature, which was unwarranted. And then we have done certain financial considerations that are there, so we're able to bring that budget deficit to show that we are financially responsible, and that's the way that we will go forward. So ladies and gentlemen, I wouldn't want to take further time on this matter, but able to answer any question and every question that you pose onto our team. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. And I'm sure there will be many questions for you as we go through the evening. But before we get into the Q&A, there are a few others who we would like to speak to you. And may I now invite Minister Dr. Harsha De Silva to address you.
Good evening. Ravi, Suresh, RHS, Arjuna, Indrajit, friends. I'm going to be very short. We got going just as we uprooted the regime, and it's been a series of long days and short nights to get this process on the road. Like Ravi said, it is a 20-day exercise. There may be glitches here and there. Some people may not like everything that's in the budget, but Ravi said they will be the first to admit if there are genuine errors, and we are ready to rectify them as we formulate the policies of implementation. One major issue that we want to address, and that is, what is development? That was a question that we raised in Parliament, outside Parliament, on the political platform, be it in Colombo, Badulla, Mana, Tissa Maharam. Our roads, shiny buildings, tall towers, development. That is what we were told. We were told that GDP per capita is close to $4,000, so therefore we're a middle income country. You should be thankful to the economic team that's been showing wondrous growth. We disagreed. We totally disagreed. We said that is not development. Development is what the household, be it in a slum of Colombo, middle class home in Kotte, or a rural household in Tissa Maharama, they have to feel their standard of living is improving, has improved, will improve. That is development to us. It does not really matter how tall the towers are. All what matters is, can I get my new tiles? Can I buy that new TV? Can I afford my daughter's wedding? Do I have to pawn every piece of gold I have to make ends meet? If the answer to that is yes, then the meaning of development has to be either agreed according to some view or re-looked at according to the other. So we have very, very simple objective we have. Our objective is improve the lives of the people of this country, which means, in a measurable way, real household income. If real household income is increasing, we succeed. If it is not, we fail. As politicians, Ravi and I, instructed by our bosses, Ranil and everyone else, are working towards this single objective. So, we have in fact broken the Ministry of Finance. People ask why. Implementation with Ravi, planning and economic affairs with the Prime Minister. And if you look at planning on economic affairs, we've taken the Department of National Planning, Department of Physical Planning, External Resource Department, the Census and Statistics Bureau, the Institute of Policy Studies. So it's the expertise there is different to implementation. So ideally, we would be public, private, academic, research institute collaboration, where we will be receptive to what the market wants and structure our policies to take this country to where it ought to go. So the difference is that what does 7.5% GDP growth mean as opposed to 0.5% household real income growth? That was the problem we had. While the country was growing at 7.5% in real terms, household income for the last 6 years grew at only 0.5% per annum. So we need to change that. We need to give more money to the people, real money to the people. The people of this country must be able to enjoy peace and what we expect from a peaceful environment. The dividends of growth must be distributed in an equitable manner, not just restricted to a few in Colombo. So that is when what we went around the country saying, we are for devolution of power, balaya bedadino. Api balaya bedadino. And that balaya is economic power. People must be empowered economically, and that is our objective, and that's where we are going with it. So that's all I'm going to say from a sort of a holistic overall point of view. We'll be happy to answer all questions you may have on this particular document and anything else that deal with the medium to longer term plan of our government. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. De Silva. We are now scheduled for a commercial break, I believe. So, and unfortunately.
Welcome back after the commercial break to the Interim Budget Discussion 2015 live on MTV Sports and News First. The interim budget, which was presented yesterday, provided special economic relief to uplift the lives of people, offering concessions to all sections of society. The proposals presented clearly reflecting the prudent economic steps that have been taken in the right direction. So we will be continuing this very constructive discussion further.
Thank you. And Arjuna, if I may invite you now for a few words.
Try to be brief. Ladies and gentlemen, from a central banker's perspective, we are obviously key advisors to the government. Our perspective, and I have several of my colleagues in the audience, and it's their distilled wisdom which we express to Honourable Minister and the team, is that, first of all, the fiscal system, the taxation system in Sri Lanka is far too complicated, right? And we have to simplify this. And there's proven evidence in several countries across the world that when you simplify taxes, bring them down to 5 or 6 taxes which people understand and can pay easily, your tax rate goes up, your collection rate as a percent of GDP goes up. Currently we collect only 12% of GDP. We are about 20 odd taxes. This system can't persist. The Honourable Minister made a specific mention of this in his speech. We thank him for taking our advice. And that really is the key to the whole puzzle. We have to simplify the tax system. I mean, for instance, on VAT, as you probably know, there are 15 pages of exemptions. And you can't persist with this system. This is ridiculous. So this is a key message the Minister has taken to heart. There is a paradox in this budget, which is, in the short term, we've actually brought in a lot of ad hoc taxes, like the super tax. Which on the face of it seems contradictory to what I'm saying. But I think the key principle has been established. What are taxes for? Taxes are basically a means of redistributing income, right? You tax the rich and then you help the not so rich to make better of their lives. And that somehow got lost along the way in translation, from my perspective. So we've been taxing things like food excessively over the last 10 to 15 years. And this, I think, has led to a lot of hardship amongst the ordinary people of this country. And when the Honourable Minister made that statement in Parliament yesterday, showing people how much of their food, basic foodstuffs were being taxed, I think that made a huge impact. Certainly that's the feedback I got just talking to a cross-section of people yesterday. So that's a very important principle. The fact that regressive taxation which impacts the less well-off sections of society more than the more affluent sections, that whole regressive structure has to be changed to be more progressive. That's what tax is for, as we understand it. The second point is that there's been a lot of government spending on infrastructure recently. Now that's good. It's for the good of the country, obviously. We have an infrastructure deficit. But the point is, did it become excessive? And certainly, speaking from the central bank's perspective, we see that there is a debt issue in this country. You know, we can't keep borrowing excessively. We have to be able to service that debt. So the issue of raising our tax to GDP links in with the amount of debt that we can contract. And that's why this is where fiscal and monetary policy really have to be combined in the medium-term structural adjustment that we are now evolving, so that we get onto a sustainable fiscal path. One thing which we noticed looking at the numbers over the last 20 days is that for the last 3 consecutive years, revenues have never exceeded 85% of the original estimates in the government budget. In other words, for 3 years, or perhaps longer, I was just looking at 3 years, 15% of expected revenues simply did not turn up. Now that is, that's not acceptable. And that's why the Honourable Minister has had such a challenge to meet his budgetary targets, to give a true picture of what is possible in terms of revenue collection to the people of this country. And I applaud him for that, because he's been absolutely transparent. And as you know, the new government is now going in for super transparency. There's a Right to Information Act on the anvil and several other similar enactments. So that's the perspective. We have to conduct fiscal policy as it should be. You can easily raise, I'll give you the example of Georgia, where from 10% of GDP they raised tax collections to 25% of GDP in a space of 3 years. How? By simply reducing the number of taxes to 5. People found it easier to pay their taxes, and they paid. They delivered. That's all we have to do in Sri Lanka. Some of these problems are very easy to solve. That's the message that we've given the Honourable Minister. He's taken it on board. In the short term, we have a bit of ad hocery. We can live with that, I'm sure. And then, once the Minister is through the next general election, etc., he'll come up with the goods. And we wish him Godspeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Governor. So now we've heard the perspective from two ministers and the Governor. And now to give you a different perspective, may I invite Dr. Indrajit Kumarasamy.
Honourable Minister, no, I'm State Minister, am I right? I hope I've got that right, yeah? Deputy Minister, sorry, Deputy Minister, ST and Governor. Let me first thank the Chamber for inviting me to speak at this very important gathering in the midst of such a elevated and distinguished panel. But I must also say that my good friend Suresh and Aliki twisted my arm rather late in the day to perform here, and so you must bear with me if what I say is a bit in the form of kind of a stream of consciousness. I was asked actually to go through what was in the budget speech. With Suresh's permission, I'm going to avoid doing that, because the last thing you want is to hear me going on and on when you really want to interact with the Minister and his senior team. So I'm going to just divide up my remarks into two. First is to kind of sketch out the landscape within which this budget was formulated, and to talk a little bit about have a kind of a short-term perspective, and then to talk a little bit more from a medium-term perspective. Now, in terms of the background landscape and the short term, it was Lee Kuan Yew who said that in developing countries, elections are an auction of non-existent resources. And it's not just in Sri Lanka. In every country with competitive polities, it's not unusual for elections to lead to expansionary fiscal policy and budgetary giveaways. So this is not unusual. But I think it is fair to ask the question whether this interim budget, two questions. One is, is there a rationale for the relief measures? Because the budget has been dominated by the relief measures. So is there a convincing rationale for the relief measures that have been introduced in the budget? That's one question. And the second question one would want to address is, have these measures been accommodated in a way that will not undermine macroeconomic stability? So those are the two questions in terms of the short-term perspective that I'd like to address. So, is there a rationale? So let me divide it into a political and economic rationale. Now, we heard Dr. Harsha De Silva, the Minister, in his remarks say that household expenditure, household income, increased by only 0.5% per annum. So we had a situation, clearly, which he described very lucidly, where there was, in fact, for a significant proportion of the population, because if the average is 0.5, there's going to be a significant proportion of the population who experience a decline in their real incomes. So there was clearly a strong political compulsion to address that issue. One also needs to put it into the context that Sri Lanka is now an increasingly aspirational society. People are very impatient in terms of their material advancement. Now, in such a context, we also need to remember that we have been a society where there have been significant fault lines on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of religion, on the basis of social class. So there are these fault lines. We can't shy away from that. Now, if you do not address a situation where real incomes are going up very slowly or are declining, then you create an environment where extremist elements can prey on the frustration of people. So there is a strong political, one could argue, there was a strong political and social compulsion to support the relief measures that were introduced in the budget. I would also like to submit that, one could argue that there was a fairly sound economic rationale as well in the short term. Because in recent years it's been domestic demand that has been driving the growth process in this economy. Now that is wholly inappropriate. That's not the right model we should have. With a country of 21 million people and a market of that size, it should not be domestic demand that should be driving the growth process. But that's where we are, or we were. And so one could argue that in the short run, given that domestic demand is what has been driving growth, that you can buy some time to make the transition to the export expansion model by boosting domestic demand to really protect the growth momentum in the economy. So there is a kind of a short-term argument that can be made that yes, we pump. Somebody, I think, who was it? Somebody said this was quantitative easing for the consumer. That's a nice way of putting it. So you had this, you boosted the consumer to provide a boost to domestic demand, and you're buying time to do the structural changes that are necessary to get into an export-driven growth model.
No QE in the central bank, I can assure
you. Anyway, so really what I'm trying to say is that there are economic and political and social reasons that one can adduce for supporting this relief package. But I think the second question is, what about macroeconomic stability? Has pumping out of this demand through these relief measures, has it undermined macroeconomic stability? And here I think it's commendable that measures have been taken to fund these measures. And if you look at the overall budget deficit, if you look at the November number, there's actually been a small improvement. It's I think it's come down from 4.6% of GDP to 4.4%. Yeah. So that means the deficit has been contained. So you're not having incremental excess demand being pumped into the system. So one can argue, okay, the macroeconomic impact is likely to be limited. But I'd like to raise two issues. Having commended the government for funding the measures, two issues is, one can argue whether the financing was done in the optimal possible way. There is one school of thought which would say it's less distortionary to increase overall rates and go down that route. Another would say, no, it's better to have discrete measures which target those who are able to pay. Now, this is a debate you can have. It's certainly I think you can argue the case both ways. So there is one, okay, has this been the best way? And maybe as we go along, we need to learn lessons to see whether we've done it the best way. The second thing is revenue. Historically, in recent years, we have had great difficulty in meeting our revenue targets. Now, I did say that the impact of the measures is likely to be neutral because as the proposals are presented, the deficit has actually come down a little bit. But of course, if we don't meet the revenue targets and the budget deficit increases, then clearly you're going to have additional demand pumped into the system, and that can have implications for prices, that's inflation, and the balance of payments. So it's important that the revenue targets are met. Now, another point to be made is that even if the revenue targets are met, that one needs to be aware that by shifting essentially resources from a relatively wealthy segment of the economy to one that is less well off, you will have an impact on savings, on investment, on consumption, etc., because the saving and consumption patterns of different parts of the economy are different, and that can have an impact on prices and on import intensity of expenditure within the economy. So the point I'm trying to make is that it's important that the authorities, and we have them all here, monitor the situation very carefully, and if they see any overheating, that they move very quickly and decisively, and to use all the tools at their disposal. The central bank has monetary and exchange rate policy. Fiscal policy is less flexible, but that can also be used to contain any excess demand that emerges in the system. And I think we need to learn a lesson from what happened in 2011, 2012, when we were a little late in responding to the overheating of the economy, which meant that there was a fairly severe stabilization package that had to be imposed, and that held back the economy quite a lot. And some of the trends that Dr. Harsha De Silva alluded to in terms of what's happened to household was, in my view, really a fallout from that stabilization package that had to be introduced. So I think the message is, one needs to monitor what's happening. If there's overheating, to move quickly and to use all the instruments at one's disposal. Okay, so that's really the landscape and the short term. What about the medium term? I'd just like to make 3 points. 1, on the structural problem on the revenue side. 2, on fiscal sustainability, in the context of a stronger growth framework. And finally, moving towards a more efficient social safety net. And let me be very quick. On the revenue side, as I said, we've had problems. That is where really we have fallen short of our targets and expectations in recent history. And really not just recent history, over the years. And here, the governor has spoken about streamlining the tax system, and certainly that's something that needs to be done. And I would suggest that the report of the Tax Reform Commission, which is already there on the table, some things have been done, but I haven't seen it. Before I go on, I must say I should really commend the authorities. I'd commend the minister and his team for the increased transparency. We now know the terms on which a lot of the government debt has been undertaken. We now know more about contingency liabilities, and that, I must say, we need to commend the authorities for moving in that direction. I should have done that at the beginning. But anyway, what I'm saying is, okay, the Tax Reform Commission report, I think one needs to look at it. One needs to continue to strengthen tax administration. And another option, which ideologically was off the table, but I hope which won't be for this new dispensation, is the sale or listing of SOEs. Really, that is a way in which, A, you can raise revenue, and B, you can improve corporate governance. I mean, there is the example of the State Bank of India, which was a highly bloated, inefficient organization. They listed 10% of their capital, and it was transformative in terms of what it did to corporate governance. So that's on the revenue side. And one thing I need to say also, which I'm sure the authorities will have their eye on, the interim budget has put in place streams of recurrent expenditure in terms of the relief offered, but a lot of the revenue measures are one-off measures. So there is a structural challenge, Honourable Minister, that you and your team would need to address in the medium term as you go forward. Okay, the second point on strengthening the growth framework. There are lots of things. You look at each of the factor markets, SOEs, SMEs. I mean, there's a whole list of stuff. But let me just focus on one thing, and that is really, if you look at the post-conflict years, in my view, the most disappointing aspect of the narrative has been investment performance. The fact that private investment has kind of plateaued at 23% of GDP, the fact that our FDI is just $1 billion, that's really very disappointing. And I think and one way of getting fiscal sustainability and strengthening revenue is to strengthen the growth framework of the economy, get the economy growing faster, and automatically your revenue, your fiscal situation improves. Look at the U.S. economy. They had a massive debt. As the U.S. economy has started to grow faster, all of a sudden the deficit is coming down sharply. And given also the rather fragile debt dynamics, it's clearly important that we think in terms of medium-term fiscal sustainability and getting the economy going and creating a greater tax base. And for that, I think investment. Investment is the key thing, and there, the most important thing in many ways, I think where we have had a challenge in the past, is really the consistency and stability of policies. Honourable Minister, that I hope will be very much the hallmark of this dispensation's efforts to strengthen the country's growth framework. On the social safety net, 2 points. One is, I think the literature now suggests that messing around with administered prices and subsidies and things like that is a second best solution, and the better way to help those who need it is to have a well-designed program of income transfers. Put money or in-kind transfers into people's hands and not have all these very complicated administered prices, etc. So that's something, clearly this is a medium to long-term exercise, but that's something, Honourable Minister, you and your team may want to think about. Finally, let me just say that this is something for all of us, all Sri Lankans. I'm not sure we can continue with this entitlement culture that we have been used to. We need to really transform from that into a far more productivity-focused, entrepreneurial culture. Because, in the old days, we used to live beyond our means and get financed with never money, concessional money. That's not available to us. So we really need to, tighten our belts, get our act together, get leaner and meaner, and that means there is this cultural shift that we need, to be much more focused on productivity. And I hope, Minister, you and your team will give us leadership, and this is something that we all need to get involved in. And with that, I'm sorry I've taken more time than I intended. Thank you very much again.